Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. This is the 2023 Giro d'Italia first rest day. Now, yesterday's Stage 9 individual time trial, we saw Remco Evenepoel, Soudal Quick-Step, win yesterday's time trial by 1 second over Geraint Thomas. We saw the Belgium kid, he was blazing at the beginning of the individual time trial, and then throughout the stage started losing power, right? The gas was just coming off and off. Then we saw Remco Evenepoel have to really struggle to come across the line to win yesterday's individual time trial over Primoz Roglic, his big-time rival here at the Giro, by 17 seconds and hold on to the stage by 1 second from Geraint Thomas. But I told you yesterday something had to be wrong with Remco Evenepoel, either the crashes that they had earlier on the rainy stages here at the Tour de France, or as we have come to now know, it's COVID. Now, between the combinations of the crashes or COVID, we don't know exactly which one. But if he was feeling the effects of COVID, that would explain the reason why he's so strong at the beginning of the stage and then starting to lose power. I'm sure all you guys have noticed it when you've been sick at home, but you don't really pair it up to how it looks in a bike race, right? But it's the same scenario. You get out of bed in the morning, you're feeling a little bit sick, but you can still move and your day can still go through and you can feel normal early in the morning because you're rested from the night before. But then as your day progresses, you start feeling worse and worse. And then later in the day, of course, as you've spent some energy, all of a sudden your power starts dropping too. Just like we saw Remco Evenepoel when he left the ramp, he was feeling good. He was in the time trial mode. The legs still had power in them. But as you're going that maximum effort, the gas reserves just start dropping fast, right? The engine's burning through things fast, and then all of a sudden you start finding out 8, 10, 15 kilometers into a 35-kilometer time trial as the legs are starting to become sore, as things in the body are starting to feel the effects of either the crash where the body's not lined up right or the COVID effects. These going to start losing power. That's why I was saying on yesterday's individual time trial, you could tell there was something wrong with Remco Evenepoel, and there's no way the Belgian kid was happy about winning yesterday's individual time trial by 1 second. All much more clear now as he has left the Giro d'Italia COVID positive. Now, what does it mean for Remco Evenepoel later in the season? Well, first off, nobody will know the answers to that except for Remco Evenepoel on how he's feeling when he gets home from the Giro. If he has to go home and take a ton of days off to recover, then of course his form's going to drop. Only takes about 4 or 5 days, start getting 6 days, 7 days into not riding your bike. This top quality form that we have seen from Remco Evenepoel throughout this whole 2023 season, because the kid was amazing at Catalonia, even better at Liège, best on Liège, came in here at the Giro d'Italia at the first Stage 1 and blew the doors off of everybody, but now has been dropping form. So if he has to take 5 days, 1 week off, that top quality form is going to be gone, and there is no way of making the Tour de France on top form if you have to take a week or 10 days off the bike. So when I see all the comments posted up about him getting ready for the Tour de France, unless this is a pre-planned COVID thing where he really doesn't have it and he just says, hey, I'm going to do the first 9 days at the Giro and then I'm going to go to the Tour de France. There's no way you can miss 7 days, 10 days of training and be sick with COVID and then come back in time to do the Tour de France. Now, could he leave yesterday's Stage 9 Giro and then go home, take a couple days rest, feel better, start back into his training and be ready for the Tour de France? Of course he could, but I think that would only hurt the reputation and the image of Remco Evenepoel to be leaving the Giro and then show up at the Tour de France and possibly lose against Tadej Pogacar or Jonas Vingegaard in this year's Tour de France. When we're looking at the 2023 season, the kid was fabulous at UAE Tour. He was good and solid with 2-stage victories against Primoz Roglic at Catalonia. And then LBL, starting here at the Giro, is going to leave with 2 individual time trial victories. And while wearing the pink jersey, there's no reason to do the Tour de France. Let the hype just keep getting up there and then focus on doing another race like the Tour de France next season. Either way, let's get into some of the tactics that are going to happen here at the Giro now that the number 1 favorite, Primoz Roglic and Remco Evenepoel, no longer will have that battle between them to decide who is the best rider here at the Giro. But we got lots to talk about because Team Ineos are in this golden seat. 5 riders in the top 13 here on the general classification. Geraint Thomas is wearing pink, though. That's a little bit of a dilemma. A lot of people would think, wow, he's wearing pink. This is marvelous. They even have the race leader's jersey. Well, what are they going to do with it with 5 riders and one Primoz Roglic sitting second on the general classification, just right behind Geraint Thomas's time on the general classification? So they have to be careful, because at this moment, after stage 9, Primoz Roglic looks to be still the best climber at the Giro. Not by much, though, because we saw Theo Gegenhardt bridge across to Primoz Roglic on that last stage 8 final climb with 6 kilometers to go, and Geraint Thomas made it across too. So we know the 2 Ineos riders are riding pretty close to the same ability of Primoz Roglic when we're talking about in the mountains, but we haven't been in the big mountains, right? That climb was only about 3 kilometers long, and we already saw some suffering from Theo Gegenhardt and Geraint Thomas to bridge that gap. So what does Ineos do with 5 riders in the top 13 on these next coming stages? Well, stage 10, stage 11 could be sprinter stages, right? Could be sprinter stages. There's a little bit of mountains throughout the earlier parts of the stage, especially when you're talking about stage 10. It's lumpy and bumpy all the way through the beginning. So when we're talking about the sprinter teams, are they going to want a field sprint on tomorrow's stage 10? Most likely, if I'm a sprinter team, I'm sitting back and we're going to see how this plays out. We're going to play the breakaway first and see how it plays out, and if we can get a rider in the break. When I look at the sprinting teams here at the Giro, there is no one-time dominant sprinter here at the Giro that can for sure say, if you get me to the finish of stage 10, I will win you stage 10. So when we're looking at these teams, I think when we come into tomorrow's stage 10, all the sprinter teams say, first we play option 1 is the breakaway. If we don't get a rider in the break, then we will pull it back for a field sprint. So when you're looking at Ineos and they have 5 riders, do you want to be riding on the front with 7 riders here at the Giro? Because let me remind you guys, that's right, Filippo Ganna has already abandoned here at the Giro, COVID positive, before yesterday's individual time trial. So now the damage of losing Filippo Ganna is going to be felt big time on Team Ineos if they get the tactics wrong on these next coming 2 and 3 stages of the Giro. They need to be careful. If there's a break going up the road, if it has sprinter teams represented in that break, Ineos have to have somebody in it, right? They have 5 guys on general classification. 10 men are Arens men, and of course, Laurens de Plus need to be in that move. Pavel Sivakov is a great option because he's in the top 10 of the general classification. So if the break on tomorrow's stage 10 and 11 is represented with a ton of sprinter teams, Ineos need to be in it. They don't need to be trying to make the break happen. They just need to be in it. They don't want to be in a 5-man group, because if they're in a 5-man group without sprinter teams, what's going to happen? Do you think Jumbo-Visma are going to have to chase? They won't have to chase for long, because eventually the sprinter teams will come to the front and they'll say, hey, I could catch 5 guys. Many times I'm asked, why does the breakaway make it to the finish? Well, the breakaway makes it to the finish when the peloton decides they don't want to catch the breakaway. So if the break has 25 riders in that front group and all the sprinter teams, or most of the sprinter teams, are represented in that front group, and it's 25 guys, Ineos better have a rider in that group. Otherwise, they're going to have to chase all day, and Jumbo-Visma is going to go, hey, you guys got pink. You guys got 5 guys in the top 13 of the general classification. You got to work all day. And if they have to work all day when we get into the later stages, starting here at the Giro in the final week when the climbing starts really proper, they might not have 5 guys on the general classification. But if you can get a 20-rider break up the road and you start talking about having Pavel Sivakov up there, you start talking about Laurens de Plus making it in there, and these guys are only about 2.5 minutes down on the general classification, or Arensman, who is a pure climber too. One of those 3 riders need to be in that group. And Ineos just look back. Primoz Roglic, Jumbo, you guys better get on the front, or we're just going to put another guy higher up on the general classification, and you're going to have to deal with our Insman when we get into stage 11, 12, 13, and 14, because we're going to move him up on the general classification. So Ineos have to play everything tactically right. If they miss the move, though, they're going to have to chase, and that's going to reduce their numbers. Now, I talked about how Ineos and UAE Team Emirates making mistakes on stage 7 when they should have been attacking pseudo quick steps, Remco Evenepoel, and see what they could have done. But now that holding back of that team on stage 7 with Remco leaving no longer matters. And because they did hold back, they still got all of their guys up here on the general classification. So stage 7 looks brilliant right now in my mind. I'll erase anything I said now that Remco Evenepoel is left. Don't erase what I really said. But now that Remco Evenepoel has left, everything is looking magical for Team Ineos. Now, I talked about Team Ineos, so we got to talk a little bit about Jumbo-Visma. What do they have to do? Well, they're in deep trouble here. You only have one guy on the general classification, but he happens to be the best rider at the Giro at this moment. So they do have that going for them. What do they have to do, though, on these next first two stages, talking 10 and 11? Well, 10 and 11, you don't want to get stuck right in the front. Hopefully you keep the break so it's not big breaks up there. But there's nothing you can do if it's really solid. So you have to have some team back there that could ride with you on these next two stages if you let Ineos get into those breaks and you can't really cover 5 guys when you're talking about Jumbo-Visma. Because even if they get a guy in that break of 20, he won't be a threat on general classification unless his name is Primož Roglič. So Jumbo-Visma having a rider in a group of 20, 25 riders up the road will do them no help. The best thing they can do, they have to look over at UAE Team Emirates, who still have 2 guys at the top 10 of the general classification with Jay Vine and, of course, Almeida riding top 5 here at the Giro. They have to make sure those 2 riders do not get in that front group. And then, if they miss that front group, now all of a sudden maybe UAE Team Emirates are forced to chase with Jumbo-Visma. Bora Hansgrohe, they're in the same boat as UAE Team Emirates. They have 2 guys at the top 10 of the general classification with Alexander Vlasov and, of course, with Leonard Kamna. So if Jumbo-Visma can control these 4 riders from getting in that front group, if that group is big, you have Bora Hansgrohe and you have UAE Team Emirates that will possibly be forced to come into the front to work with Jumbo-Visma. Either way, Jumbo-Visma's in a lot of trouble when we're talking about having to look after 5 Ineos riders. I can almost guarantee you on tomorrow's stage 10 or 11, it will be a big break that's going up the road because right now there's sharks in the water, they smell the blood, and they know anything's possible. And everybody that's trying to get in the breakaway in tomorrow's 10 and 11 know for sure Ineos are going to want to be in the break with them. If Ineos is in there, if 2, 3 sprinter teams are in there, talking about teams like Alpecin de Koenig, and of course talking about Mark Cavendish, Astana's team, who's not going to be able to do much on tomorrow's stage, so you know they're going to be in there for sure. When we're talking about Mark Cavendish being able to sprint on these next 2 stages, Astana will be represented in these front groups for sure. And then when we look at the other sprinter teams like Trek Segafredo and DSM, if they're in there, you know Ineos have to be in there, and then the racing's going to be full gas back there. It's going to be attacks nonstop because Remco Evenepoel has left the Giro. Primož Roglič, just like when we heard about stories, when we're talking Mathieu van der Poel saying sometimes it's easier racing with all of the favorites because I only have to keep my eye on one Wout van Aert. Well, Primož Roglič just lost that one eye that he had to keep an eye on, Remco Evenepoel. So all of the tactics here at the Giro are going to become very interesting. Now, Team Ineos, I told you about everything they need to do with those 5 riders if they want to put pressure on Jumbo-Visma, but maybe I was completely wrong. Maybe Team Ineos, the management, are saying, Geraint Thomas, the 2018 Tour de France champion, we have 100% faith in going head-to-head with Primož Roglič, and if he can't do it, well, we have Theo Gegenhardt, the 2020 Giro champion, that can battle with Primož Roglič. But if they don't have 100% faith, I think we're going exactly into the tactics that I just explained here on Beyond the Coverage of 5 guys all going up the road trying to put pressure on Jumbo-Visma. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. The Butterfly Effect is back with Stage 10 tomorrow, so I'll see you guys real soon.